Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Really excited to be with all of you. I'm Nathan Oley. I'm the CEO of the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. And here today really to highlight and showcase some great partners from the federal family with a specific focus today on COVID economic recovery, specifically through federal rural entrepreneurship programs. I'm delighted and excited to be joined today by four great members of our federal family. I'm going to give them a quick opportunity to introduce themselves and their agency, and then we're going to walk into a great conversation. And so, Allison, I will let you go first with a quick intro.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for having me. And I am proud to represent the Department of Veterans Affairs and all of the incredible Veterans Health Administration employees. I have been with the VA for nearly 10 years. I've moved throughout the agency between policy, operations, and I've settled in innovation for the past 6 years. As the co-director for the VHA Innovators Network, one part of a larger VHA innovation ecosystem, my job is really to facilitate, enable the discovery and development of intrapreneurs, employees at VA's 1,200 plus medical facilities who we develop into innovative thinkers and creators. We provide training and resources to support their innovative solutions and themselves, so personally and professionally. And we collaborate with the external healthcare entrepreneur community through an initiative we call the Greenhouse, which provides innovators a chance to ideate, co-design, and test prototypes with VA employees within our network. The Greenhouse really enables us to fulfill our mission of learning by doing, and VA's fourth mission, which is to support the country at large, particularly in times of emergency, which of course has been important this past year. Both of our internal and external efforts were heavily impacted by COVID, a true time of emergency in the world's healthcare community, which VA is the largest healthcare system in the US. What we witnessed, however, wasn't a dismissal of innovation as a priority, but an influx of passion and creative thinkers who were able to persevere and pivot. So I look forward to today's discussion about that experience and journey, and thank you again for having me.
Thanks so much, Allison. Very much appreciate that. Alex, do you want to go next?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Contreras, and I work for the U.S. Small Business Administration. I work in the Office of Disaster Assistance, which is the office which has the primary mission of responding to disasters, declared disaster events around the country. But right now, all of SBA is really responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Normally, the SBA's mission is to help small businesses and entrepreneurs start, grow, expand, and even recover from disasters. But right now, we've got a number of really big programs, which I'll go through in our discussion. But I'm really happy to join everyone here today.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Alex. Appreciate it. Dean, I'll hand it to you next.
First, I want to say thank you. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Dean Brazier, and I'm in the office at the Securities and Exchange Commission with the longest title, the Office of the Advocate for Small Business Capital Formation. And so before I continue, I have to give the traditional SEC disclaimer. Any views I express today are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Commission, any of the commissioners, or any of my colleagues on the staff of the Commission. Now, to give a short description for the office, we were created to identify and help bridge the gaps between small businesses and the capital they need to succeed. For us, small business is a pretty broad term. It includes generally three groups: early stage companies, mature and late stage private companies, and smaller public companies with a public float up to $250 million. We also have a mandate to identify and address the unique challenges faced by minority-owned, women-owned, rural, and natural disaster area small businesses and their investors. How do we accomplish this mission? Well, we approach our mission through working with small businesses and their investors to understand their capital formation issues through education and outreach. We analyze the potential impact of proposed SEC and self-regulatory organizations' rules and regulations likely to significantly affect small businesses and their investors. And we also help small businesses and their investors resolve some of the issues with the SEC and the SROs by recommending policy changes to Congress and the Commission. We act as a voice. And lastly, I just want to take an opportunity to highlight our participation in National Entrepreneurship Week with a couple more events. First, we have a series of Fireside Chats with Acting Chair Allison Heron Lee and our office's director, which we are posting daily, and you can find that on the SEC's website and YouTube. And second, tonight our director will be participating in a clubhouse discussion on regulation crowdfunding at 7 p.m. And you can register for that event at lu.ma/newcfrules. Again, that's lu.ma/newcfrules. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Dean. And last but certainly not least, Jennifer.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks, Dean. It's great to follow you. I don't have any disclosures that I have to make, so that's helpful. Thank you. I'm the program manager with the Appalachian Regional Commission for Business Development. Our commission is a 13-state commission. It's a really unique partnership between the state governors, 13 state governors, and a federal co-chairman who is named by the president. And that our commission actually serves many functions. One is as a grant maker, and we do that work through a couple of different funding programs. One solicitation that's currently on the streets now, it's called our Power Initiative. The second is really through our research that we do. We have a fantastic research right now that's out on entrepreneurial ecosystems. I think can be helpful for a lot of people on this call and others throughout the region. And I think a third is convening people of who have similar interests that we can work with together. So we have 5 basic goal areas that we work in. The one that's most pertinent to this group is economic opportunities. And most of that is entrepreneurship and business development in general. But we also work in workforce development, we work in leadership development and natural and cultural assets, along with critical infrastructure. So all major components to the entrepreneurial ecosystem and very critical. Our commission, just to give you a sense of size, we have 65 people that work for the commission, but we rely heavily on the 13 state program managers that are all located in their individual states and alternates who are appointed by their governors that make decisions along with our federal co-chairman for the direction of our commission. So thank you.
Thank you all very much for joining us today. It's such an incredibly important conversation today in the face of COVID and obviously the impacts that we see in small businesses. And so I want to start the conversation at that higher level about impacts that we're seeing in those small business, especially across the country regarding COVID. And so Dean, I know you've got a couple slides that you want to share to kind of start off the conversation, and then we'll integrate in everyone to start high level and then dive into some of the weeds.
Thank you. So COVID-19, as everyone is aware, has had a profound human toll on communities over the last year, and it has brought some significant challenges to small businesses. If you see some of the reports below, some of the graphics that I'll show in the slides, our annual report highlights some of the initial impacts that have been broadly felt across the country. So as you can see here with slide 1, the darkest shading represents closures of 30 to 40% of all small businesses in the state. And the next lighter shade represents closures of 25 to 30%. As you can see, those are not isolated instances. And unfortunately, for every state where we have data, the number of small businesses declined. On our next slide, you can see that revenues for those businesses that remained open took a significant hit from COVID-19. Decreases can be attributed to a variety of reasons, from changes to customer spending to social distancing measures. This won't come as a surprise to you, but businesses that require in-person interaction, such as hospitality, retail, entertainment, transportation, personal services, and food services, were impacted the most. We can take this further on the next slide. On this slide, you see that in the first few months of the pandemic, we saw small business closures disproportionately impacting women and minority-owned businesses. Since February is Black History Month, I want to conclude with some data highlights about the impact of COVID by highlighting that Black-owned businesses experience the highest losses of any other group. And we're focused on supporting solutions that can support Black-owned businesses rebuilding and accessing the capital needed to do so. If you examine the COVID-19 impact on underrepresented groups, you'll see that it's critical to remediate long-term gender and racial inequities in capital formation. And again, I encourage everyone to check out our annual report at sec.gov/OASB, where you can learn more about our policy priorities and the proposed solutions.
Thanks so much, Dean. It's, one of the reasons I was so excited for this panel is, it's a really interesting group of federal agencies that we're talking to today, anywhere from the Veterans Administration to small business to the Appalachian Regional Commission that obviously is working really in depth with communities. And so I would love to get from each of your perspective a quick summary of what you've seen from the work you're doing, from the communities and the businesses that you're working with or trying to serve in some way, and what is that true impact that you're seeing on the ground, and any thoughts or ideas about how we help to alleviate some of the pain that we're seeing on the ground.
I'm happy to talk a little bit first. What I have witnessed is really, and I mentioned it earlier, is a tremendous ability to pivot, adapt, and create. It's been apparent in both, casual and personal observations, your local brewery shifting to sanitizer production rather than beer, or a local boutique sewing masks instead of their typical accessories. And professionally, we have seen a resilience of innovation spurred by COVID. This summer, the VHA, Veterans Health Administration Innovation Ecosystem, co-sponsored a series of make-a-thon events with a veteran nonprofit called Challenge America. And this was a virtual series that focused on a challenge essential workers in different fields, think emergency services, long-term care, environmental services, et cetera, what they were facing due to the pandemic. And it brought together teams of subject matter experts, makers, engineers, end users, anyone who wanted to participate really, to design a solution and prototype to challenges identified by these essential workers within 1 week. And for some of these teams, however, the series wasn't just an event or a fun weekend. It really spawned new startups and new companies who continue that work that they started over a week in the summer. And we're collaborating with a number of these entrepreneurs to continue to flesh out their solution design, test their prototype, and they are passionate. They are determined to do good. And to me, that means that entrepreneurship is alive and well, even during this really difficult time. And it gives me a lot of hope, and it's really exciting.
Thank you, Allison. Jen, were you gonna comment there as well?
Yeah, I think Alice and I might share the same optimism and enthusiasm with the dose of reality I think that Dean provided, which is critical for us all to remember where we are right now. And while everybody is faced with these challenges, our small businesses are faced with them. I think in Appalachia, I see a resilience. And Alice, I know I'm stealing your word, but it just is so, I think, in the nature of Americans, but I think in Appalachians, we've had to be scrappy, and we are scrappy, relatively scrappy. And so we've witnessed a lot of that. And I wanted to just provide maybe a couple of different examples. I mean, one, we have what's called the Innovation Center at Ohio University, and they provide, it is a business incubator or business service organization, provides all sorts of space, but most importantly, business incubation services. So coaches, technical assistants, et cetera. What they have found over the last 9 months to a year is a major demand and spike for biotech, life sciences, lab space, and the need to do that. And one of the organizations that they've worked with throughout the years on entrepreneurship was responsible for a company that produces the ultra low temperature freezers that are now taking and making sure that the vaccines are across the country. And so, we're seeing that these little glimmers of what had already been planted and started really starting to ignite when it comes to that. And then two quick examples on tourism related businesses, because what we're seeing in some of our states, and these two states I'm going to mention, West Virginia and Virginia, is actually a growth in outdoor tourism and a growth in people wanting to have a different experience outside of an urban area. One of our grantees that we've worked with in the past through ARC is called Barter Theater, and they're located in Abington, Virginia. And Barter Theater have received some funds to be able to build some housing for the actors who would come in on a rotating basis in their theater. And what they did, as this all happened, was to take those funds and actually buy a drive-in theater that was dying and revamp that and turn it into a place where they could have live shows, so live theater productions. And they were able to bring in the first month 4,000 people. So people who had never participated in anything that they had done. So they were, in my opinion, it's very entrepreneurial. So it's not just about the theater, it's about everything that's around that. And the final example is the Hatfield Mccoy Trail, which is in southwestern, West Virginia. And that trail system, a 700-mile trail system for ATVs and other off-road vehicles, and actually a major tourism draw. They were shut down until May of last year, but in this, what they had was funding from ARC through another grantee to be able to fund new businesses launching around the trail system, new tourism related businesses. Well, what they found is they needed to save the ones that were there. But the spike in tourism has now made it possible for them to provide funding for PPE and other things for the businesses around the trails, but also to be able to now help new businesses that are getting started, that are launching, that are lodging related or restaurant, any of those things that can support the work. And they've had their largest year ever in history in terms of the trail usage. So lots of scary things, but also some pretty big opportunities that are out there in front of us right now.
Thanks for sharing that, Jen. That's a fantastic. Those are a couple of fantastic examples. Alex, anything you wanted to add on this point from SBA?
Yeah, so I would echo the sentiments about the resiliency of small businesses and entrepreneurs through this period. We've seen, a lot of success stories of them being, able to adapt, to this new environment, getting more involved, switching business activities to e-commerce, which has been a great way for some of those businesses to at least maintain some of their income. As far as entrepreneurs go, though, so looking at, businesses that didn't start really at the beginning of this, they're looking to start, through this period. There's definitely far fewer programs for them, just to be frank. Just looking at the programs that SBA is providing for COVID relief. There's the Paycheck Protection Program. A business had to be in operation by February 15th. In order to be eligible for that forgivable loan program. For the economic injury disaster loan, a business had to be in operation by January 31st of 2020. For the upcoming Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, business had to be in operation by February 29th, 2020 in order to be eligible for that. And then there's a number of other grant programs that are being looked at in the next round of COVID relief programs. But all of those include, dates that going back to early 2020 that the business had to be in operation. There's still the regular SBA programs that we provide out there for entrepreneurs that are looking to start a business. Those are what we call the guaranteed loan programs. So you go through a participating lender. If you're unable to get capital through a traditional banking program, and SBA will guarantee a portion of the loan in order to, for the bank to make that. but there's not anything special about those that wasn't there before. And right now, the appetite seems to be, there's definitely a need for more grant assistance, because opening a new business and having to take on debt right now at a time when revenue is being suppressed because of all of the different things that are involved with the pandemic is a much higher risk for businesses. So, and then the other thing is SBA, where we are, definitely increasing our involvement is on the counseling services. So SBA has a network of 68 regional and district offices around the country. We also work really closely with our resource partners, which are small business development centers, SCORE business counselors, women's business centers, and veterans business outreach centers. All of those provide free counseling services to entrepreneurs looking to start a new business, and they can put them in touch with whatever programs might be available in their area. Because we've seen, there's not just federal assistance programs, but there's a lot of state and local programs that are, being administered. The funding might be federal, but they're being administered through state and local program offices. So it's a great starting point. We suggest is, getting in touch with those local business counseling services.
Alex, you bring up a really great point, and one I think that is sometimes overlooked in these conversations, and that is it's really important, obviously, to help those existing businesses and make sure they stay in business, but also there are a lot of potential new businesses, and what resources, what opportunities, what policies are in place or could be put in place to try and help accelerate more new business formation as well. And so we'd love to open it up to any of the other panelists if they have additional thoughts on ways we not just help those that are currently in business, but also spur new business formation as well.
I will continue to be the first one to talk. It's fine. I'm used to it. Allison, Ryan, I was always first in school. So, the entire VHA innovation ecosystem really encouraged and continues to encourage collaboration. So throughout COVID, it was really important for us to work with the best and brightest to maintain and improve our quality and access to care. There are 9 million veterans enrolled in the VA. There are over 1,200 medical healthcare facilities, and obviously COVID was quite a large issue for us to tackle. And we had a number of programs that really drove home some of the collaborations and the opportunities internally. But we have a new initiative that I also talked a little bit about in my intro that was an indirect result of COVID and is really for the external community and the external entrepreneurial and startup and healthcare community to come in and work with us. And it's called the Greenhouse Initiative. Because of innovation community events like the Makeathon or a hackathon, what I observed was a need in the entrepreneurial startup community for end users. So someone who is going to provide feedback on a burgeoning new piece of tech or product or et cetera. There's a lot of effort that goes into user experience testing and early stage kind of discovery and finding out what the problem is, who the end user truly is, so that they can create and ideate on a solution. And so through the Greenhouse, the VHA Innovators Network, INET we call it, and it provides access to a pool of engaged and equipped frontline healthcare professionals and 9 million end users. There are 320,000 plus healthcare professionals that work for VHA as well. So it's a huge opportunity for the external community to grow from the very get-go with us to really hone in on who they are creating their new solutions and innovations for, and empathetically design these products. And we have a team of innovation specialists at our network's 39 sites throughout the country. They're local innovation program and project leaders who work as design project leads for the greenhouse collaborations. And we literally launched this in late December. So it's all very new, but we've gotten great feedback and a lot of interest, and we're really excited about the potential to deliver more for veterans and for the healthcare community at large with our external partners.
Thanks so much, Allison. Jen or Dean, anything you want to share before I ask another question?
Yeah. In terms of new tools and resources, our office is a little unique. Unlike some of the other agencies here today, the SEC doesn't have funds to give out. But as I noted earlier, the Commission has provided several different types of COVID relief. And in the spirit of intergovernmental collaboration, we've also tried to direct small businesses to other resources we're aware of, including a list of COVID resources on our website, where we've got also educational materials. And as I mentioned earlier, we've pivoted from doing outreach at in-person events to a series of virtual coffee breaks, roundtables. It's important that we reach small businesses and their investors where they're located. And so we've got recordings of these events on our website, and we've had great feedback as to ways that they've been helpful to entrepreneurs and their investors during COVID.
Nathan, I'll just throw in real quick. Some of the new tools that we have seen that have emerged, I mean, we are, just as your previous panel, a lot of the folks on there had described themselves as intermediaries. I mean, we really serve in that fashion, right? We fund organizations that provide direct either capital to businesses or direct technical assistance to businesses, or both, usually, sometimes both, right? So we were excited. We are excited. The state of West Virginia put $6 million just this past fall into 6 revolving loan funds to serve that state. And it's a pretty exciting story. It's not something that they would, that they had previously done with a lot of their Appalachian Regional Commission money, because there's so many different needs, but they see the benefit of building new businesses and saving those that are here. But what we see as our role is to really prime the pump with our grantees. So with the organizations that we already work with on a regular basis. So we have relationships with, for example, Rural Rise, which Nathan is one of the leaders of, an organization of all kinds of people who work on building out pieces of the ecosystem for entrepreneurs. So maintaining the relationships in that fashion, while also bringing people together to solve specific issues. Allison is so specific on the issues that she is solving. It's amazing. But in our region, we have people who are working on food systems. One of my colleagues, Maika Sanderson, has pulled together groups to have conversations at how are we doing that in COVID, right? She's done Facebook groups, she's done other things. And we anticipate as a set of new tools emerging around providing direct assistance or I guess matchmaking from the Appalachian Regional Commission to different organizations. And we convene so that people can learn from one another. And most importantly, find opportunities to partner and collaborate. And the example I mentioned earlier about, we have it's called the Power Grant that's available right now, up to $1.5 million. For organizations that are in the Appalachian region. These are fairly large collaborations that have to emerge, and I'll put the link in the chat here in a minute. But what we expect is that the partnerships bring a whole lot of people together and are all based on the exact demand within the region, that there is something to back up what they're saying that they need. Allison, you're not going to have one of your makers or your innovators working on something where there isn't a need. You've already said, here's the need, help us figure this out. That's what we want to see from grantees. So as a new tool, that is one you know, we've had for a little while, but it's on the street right now, so people can come together to help provide additional new, you know, this new COVID world that we're in, ways in order to solve some of the things that face us. And so that's just a couple of examples.
So Jen, I'm going to take something you just said and flip it back on you and maybe Alex really quickly. One of the questions that came in through the Q&A was around how do we think about helping travel, tourism, and hospitality sectors that don't qualify for things like PPP or the CARES Act. Any thoughts from your own experiences or any of your programs that might help those businesses that don't necessarily qualify specifically for CARES Act or PPP funding, but still obviously have an incredible need to both stay open, but also reinvigorate their communities?
Sure. Alex, I can start real quick, and then if you want to cut me off, but the example that I mentioned from West Virginia, the Emergency Revolving Loan Fund, as an example, they're open and willing to help anyone that's in that state. But we have across the 13 states a whole network of community development finance institutions, et cetera, who are willing to step up and help travel and tourism businesses. They recognize the need. ARC just released a travel and tourism study that talked about what communities needed to be successful in that economic sector. So I encourage people to take a look at that. But definitely our cadre of grantees are the people that are out there that are doing the work for small businesses, with small businesses. They are willing to help anyone, but we do have funding. We do have people who are providing small business financing that can help those types of businesses that maybe a PPP or an EIDL loan or from the Small Business Administration, excuse me, doesn't necessarily fit.
Thanks, Jen. Alex, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so a couple things. SBA's webpage, and I'll put it in the chat, sba.gov/coronavirus relief. We have there a list of all the different assistance programs that we're currently offering. The question referenced the Paycheck Protection Program, or Triple P, which they wouldn't be eligible for, which is probably one of the most popular programs because it starts off as a loan, but it's largely forgivable. There's also the economic injury disaster loan. It's not forgivable, but it provides emergency working capital. Right now, it provides up to 6 months of working capital, up to a maximum of $150,000. We do expect that there's going to be some changes made to that program in the near future. It was the last administration's policy, to have that cap of $150,000. And so now with a new team coming in, they may want to put their own stamp on that program within the limits of what they can do. So we may see some, increased eligibility as far as like the loan amount goes. Statutorily, that program can go up to $2 million. So we'll see what happens with that. But that would be an option. But again, it's a loan, it's not a grant. And then also on that page I mentioned, if they went down a little further, you'd see an option for other resources. So SBA has put together a list of other funding resources, not from SBA, but are available and searchable by zip code. And I think the program that Jen mentioned would be one that shows up in there. There's a lot of the revolving type programs that are in there that are source funding might come from like EDA or something like that, or maybe from HUD's Community Development Block Grant Program, where state and local jurisdictions have, repurposed the funds specifically to help economic development in their communities as a result of COVID. So I'll put a direct link to that searchable list also, but that's another good resource of, it's non-SBA programs, but it's, at this point, our recommendation to businesses and entrepreneurs are, search and apply to everything that you can, because it's rare that you're going to find, and this is just true in disaster recovery, as a whole. It's rare that you're going to find one program that's going to meet all of your needs. Most likely, it's going to be multiple things. It's going to be tax assistance that you're going to need help with. It's going to be some type of emergency capital that you're going to need help with. It's going to be some counseling to help you, change your business plan, going into the future here. There's a lot of different ways that you can need help. So definitely research and pursue as many of these programs as you can is our recommendation.
Thanks so much, Alex. So I want to take a step back a little bit. Obviously all of us have been impacted in different ways by COVID, but I would assume that each of your agencies has also been impacted in both the way that you operate, but also the way you think about funding programs or policy or other avenues that are going to both assist small businesses themselves, but also better align resources and opportunities for those small businesses. And so we'd love to get your own perspective on how COVID has impacted your agency and the work that you do, but also how you think about assistance or policy that affects small businesses.
I can take some of the load off of Allison if you don't want.
I was just going to say, oh, good one.
I'm sorry. As I mentioned earlier, COVID forced us to get creative and leverage technology in a better way. At the commission level, we're focused on, among a number of other things, maintaining the continuity of commission operations, monitoring market functions and system risks, providing prompt, targeted regulatory relief and guidance to issuers, investment advisors, and other parties that we regulate that have been affected by COVID-19, as well as maintaining our enforcement and investor protection efforts, particularly with regard to the protection of our market systems and the most vulnerable investors. At the office level, I've already talked about how we pivoted from physical to virtual and maintaining our engagement levels with the broader investor and small business entrepreneurial community. In terms of things that we're looking at going forward and trying to help with the recovery, one area of continued focus touches on the last slide that I showed. So we'll be focusing on underrepresented businesses and investors among a number of other areas. We often analogize our office to a small startup. Just as we've had to adopt new technology to reach small business owners and investors, we're very optimistic that technological adoptions and innovations will facilitate capital formation for businesses in rural areas and areas affected by natural disasters. As some of you may have seen, recent press reports describe the trends in early stage financing away from traditional coastal hubs like Silicon Valley in New York to areas like Austin, Salt Lake City, Chicago. And so as we see these trends, we see that the private markets are full of capital and that small businesses are receiving large checks. And if you look at the aggregate numbers for later rounds of financing, you'll see that the dollar value of deals increased in 2020. It was a banner year for venture capital. However, we also noticed that the number of deals decreased sharply in Q3. Taken together, we see that this reflects what we have heard about funds supporting existing companies in their portfolios. And then lastly, as we dig deeper into the data in our report, you can see two important areas of concern for underrepresented businesses and investors. First, emerging fund managers as well as smaller fund managers continue to decline in number. And this is significant because those managers tend not to be as concentrated on the coast where the mega funds are and are important sources of capital for earlier stage companies, particularly those companies with minority and women ownership and companies away from the coast. And second, the percentage of raises by small funds with less than 50 million in assets under management was on track to dip below 40% for the first time since 2008, which would be a 12-year low. And so we think that focusing on this area will help address some of the trends that we're seeing, as well as encourage small business capital formation in those areas.
So I can kind of give a little bit of insight into what SBA's experience was after COVID-19 started. So we're a pretty small agency. A lot of times we find businesses are not familiar with our programs unless they, it becomes a point where they, are being recommended to us through, their banker or some type of business counselor. But after COVID-19, the mission really has just, shot up in order for us to respond. And, even on the disaster side, we've responded to the largest disasters in the country's history, but we never had the statutory authority before to declare a pandemic. So this was actually sort of an unknown prior to COVID-19 as to whether or not we would have the authority to declare it, what kind of programs would we provide. So this has answered that for sure. And, the level of assistance that we've done, it's just incredible. I mentioned before the PPP program, it's over it's getting close to $650 billion now. The economic injury disaster loan is over $200 billion in loan assistance. We did $20 billion in what we call emergency idle advance grants. And then we already have approved, ready to start sending out another $15 billion for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program that's going to be launching soon, and then another $20 billion for a targeted advance program. So, in all of the agency's history, we had only done about $67 billion in disaster assistance. So if you add up, in the agency's history since 1953, all of the hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, flooding, major events, in total, we had done $67 billion in disaster loans for homeowners, renters, and businesses. Now, we're creeping up towards the $1 trillion mark here for the pandemic. And so, and this has just been really interesting experience because in all of the disaster exercises and things we've, game played, pandemic is one of those scenarios where it comes up occasionally every so few years, but it wasn't high on people's list of likely events. And that's really changed. I think it's going to change everybody's mindset. It's going to be a cultural shift here in the disaster recovery world. And it's going to force us to really focus on, how do we respond to a natural disaster or a national disaster of this magnitude? Because before we could respond to something that has like a real clear footprint, it might include several states across multiple regions, and that's a major event for the country to respond to, something that affects, all of the coastal states, for example, a Gulf Coast hurricane. And then it might even be a difficult one if we had multiple disasters, like maybe wildfires in California going on at the same time. Now we're fighting it on both fronts. But with COVID-19, it was literally all 50 states, all U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia declared at the same time. And, this very small agency, SBA, is now, responding to inquiries and things and trying to help, not only just cover its normal mission of helping small businesses start, grow, and expand, but also this, really monumental task of helping those other businesses recover and, just maintain through this pandemic. So definitely a game changer event for the SBA for sure.
Thanks for framing that, Alex. It's really helpful. Any other thoughts from Jen or Allison?
I think Alex, you, all of the folks at the Small Business Administration, definitely, you all should be so proud of the work that you have put in. And we have a lot of organizations through the Appalachian Regional Commission that we fund who are saying they're helping people get PPP loans, or some of our community development finance institutions are actually, running some of the PPP dollars through. And so I think you have been resilient in your response to what is happening. And as a federal partner, I appreciate the partnership that you all have brought to the table and allowed organizations in Appalachia, for example, to really start getting the resources they need to make a big difference. So I just want to applaud your efforts. I'm probably taking Nathan's thunder there, but wanted to give you that shout out.
No, but that's a great point because it really has been about those partnerships. And I think going forward, those are going to be even more important. And I think the new administration and Congress has even signaled that they're going to focus on that as well. If you look at what's being proposed in this next COVID relief package, there's a part in there about community navigating pilot program. And that's really all about helping those state and local resources and providing them the funds that they need in order to connect those businesses and their communities with these assistance programs that are already available. When we look back at the experience for the Paycheck Protection Program, when we first launched, most of the funds went to businesses that had existing relationships with their banks because it was easy for them to pick up the phone and, you know, go through that program. But think about all of those small businesses out there in these you know, vulnerable communities and hard hit communities that didn't have those kinds of existing relationships. They had a much harder time. And so what they did was they reset and required that the first dollars would be targeted towards small dollar loans rather than the big ones. And then they had much greater diversity in how the funds were distributed. So they need to, you know, do more approaches like that, but it takes some thoughtful, you know, planning when you launch those kinds of programs. But I think we're on the right path now.
And Alex,
I'll tell you why I brought it up real quick, and to bring it back around. When the pandemic started, we worked closely with Appalachian Community Capital, one of our grantees that's done a lot throughout our region with the community development finance institutions. And what Appalachian Regional Commission did was take $3.75 million, small when you start talking about your dollars, Alex, but something that could be impactful for the organizations who are now being asked to help navigate all of these entrepreneurs. They're very complicated. It's complicated for all of us to understand, but all of the complicated resources that are out there, and thank God there are all the resources that we have, but it still takes some navigation. And so we were able to help 31 different revolving loan funds and CDFIs be able to stabilize their operations and be able to help more entrepreneurs navigate different resources that are out there, and for them to be able to be a little more flexible with their borrowers and what they could do. So we're all kind of getting there together, Alex, for sure. But I think it's been a great partnership.
And Alex, you talked about the second round of the PPP program and getting access to it for you know, small businesses, small minority-owned businesses, for those that don't have, you know, existing banks in their communities. You know, really hard to reach communities. And one of the questions in the chat earlier was, how can we help in bringing viable solutions to assist struggling Black businesses and other businesses of with owners of color? And so would love any thoughts or input that any of you have on how do we help businesses that are minority owned or even hard to reach businesses in the programs and offerings that you guys have.
So I'll be really quick on this point for SBA. On the disaster loan side, that's not information that we traditionally would capture in our application. So, and when we rolled out the COVID relief programs for the economic injury disaster loan program, we didn't include that. So we don't have good visibility right now on, you know, the race and ethnicity of the business owners who are receiving that form of assistance. The Paycheck Protection Program added it later. And so now they're capturing it, but it's voluntary. They don't always get a response on that, which we understand, because that's, you know, traditional for any kind of application, you know, you file. But with the new administration coming in, that was one of the very first executive orders we saw, which was this push to make sure that there's equity in these programs. And so we immediately started receiving the directives of start identifying in your programs where this is missing and where we can start adding in. So we're working on that now. And I think you'll see some changes to the next round of programs that we come out with, because the pressures has been serious from the administration that this is going to change and we're going to do this, and we're fully on board with that. So yeah, so that's my 2 cents on that subject.
I'd like to build on a couple of the points that Alex and Jen made in response to your last question, which I think would carry forward to your current question, we can have the greatest programs, policies, and resources in place and implement them perfectly, but it doesn't help those small businesses and those investors if they can't reach out and access those resources. And as you mentioned, it's important that we notice that with the first round of distributions, it was the people who had access and could pick up their phone and call their bankers. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a trend where it's the existing companies in the portfolios. And so we think it's important that you consider the networks that are making this information, these resources available, and how you transition across that network, which in turn brings me into the second point, the question that you currently asked, and how we think that builds in there. We think it's important to address the unmet need among those entrepreneurs that are seeking capital from funds, especially underrepresented founders. And if you go back to our annual report, we recommend more support for pooled investment vehicles. Also in our report, we make some recommendations specific to them. We encourage Congress and the Commission to explore initiatives to increase diversity among the investment decision makers, to help shift away from historic trends that negatively impact underrepresented founders. And this goes to breaking the cycle that pattern matching engenders. In addition to pattern matching, there's the concept of local vesting. We encourage exploring ways to promote the formation of smaller regional funds to facilitate growth of sustainable regional ecosystems through local vesting programs like ARC, programs and managers and incubators that are handling that shift from the coast to places like Austin or Chicago. And these firms are going to be more likely to invest in underrepresented founders in their located areas, which happen to be away from the coast. We've seen trends that show the distances, as the distances increase between an incubator or a fund manager and a small business, you're less likely to invest. And so it's important that you bring that investing within the community. And so ultimately, we think that companies that get angel funding are going to be the companies that go on to raise the capital needed to grow and scale. And those companies who are able to access the funding needed to reach the mature later stages, and as the SEC eventually go public, we think it's important that the diversity of public company leadership and the types of companies in the public market do not just start the day they go public. And we think it's important that access to capital and diversity starts at earlier stages, when that angel funding and that seed capital is needed.
I know from a lot of what I do with my program is internal and entrepreneurial, but what's important to remember is that everything that we do internally and the entrepreneurs that we are supporting, the project work and the innovations, they almost always partner with external collaborators to make the programs happen. If it's through a contract or a creative research agreement, I think that the first line of offense for the external community, if you want to work with the government on our end, is to become get on the GSA schedule, become a registered vendor to work with the government. We have a lot of the solutions and these startups that are coming out of the community events, or companies that are working with us on a massive 3D printing campaign for PPE, hundreds of initiatives that we're supporting internally that do touch the external world. What they tend to run into once they try to make things happen is being vendorized to work with us. So that would be like the easiest step first. We very much support and a small, disabled, veteran-owned and minority-owned businesses. So finding out how to do that and getting all those ducks in a row is going to make that transition easier. We are always, throughout the VA, not just in innovation, we are always collaborating.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much for your time today. It's been great to be a part of this conversation, to hear about the great work that each of your agencies are doing, and obviously the impact it's having on communities. So I want to thank everyone for their participation and the opportunity to be a part of this great conversation. So Joe, I will hand it back to you.
Great, Nathan, thank you for doing such a great job facilitating. I want to go ahead and thank each of our panelists. We have so many questions, and probably more questions that we can get to than we can get to today. We're so appreciative of your time and your energy. We know there's been a lot that's been placed on your shoulders in order to go ahead and help us all get through this last year. So we are really appreciative of you joining us and sharing your wisdom with us today. I want to go ahead and just thank all of those who participated today as participants listening to us, and remind people that next year, National Entrepreneurship Week will be falling on February 12th through the 19th. Pointing out that it is also during Valentine's Day. So we're going to go ahead and show our love and our support next year in amazing ways, maybe send chocolates to all of the entrepreneurs or something like that. I also want to go ahead and just point out that starting in about 3 minutes, we have a Twitter chat, Twitter storm, a social media storm that's going to be taking place. So we'd like for everybody who's listening to really sort of engage in conversations and go back and forth to really show the folks across the country in support of entrepreneurship. I don't know if Amber's on, if there's anything else that Amber, you want to go ahead and provide, but if not, I want to just go ahead and reiterate our thanks for your participation on National Entrepreneurship Week. Amber, anything else you want to go ahead and share?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you, Nathan, and thank you to everyone that was able to join us for the duration of this program. It's been really powerful to hear all the agencies talk about collaboration. So we appreciate you tremendously.
And we look forward to continuing to collaborate throughout the course of the year to figure out ways to get more information out to as many people as possible. So thank you all for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. We really appreciate it. Now on to social media storm. Woohoo!
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.